The phone rang in a house so quiet I could hear the heat click. Before I saw the name, I knew it was my son. Mom, why are all the cards declined? We're at Salt and Cedar. It's $232. People are staring. Just Zell me, please. A fork clinked. A laugh too loud. Another voice slipped in sharp and polite. Can you put her on speaker? I'm already here, I said. Good morning. Can you fix it for today? He begged. Just today. We'll talk later. I looked at the winter light on Puget Sound and said the word I should have learned years ago. No, not today. Silence. A chair scraped. Then, we'll talk soon. Here's what they didn't know. At 3:10 a.m., I changed the passwords. I froze the rainy day transfers that only ever rained on me. I removed every authorized user who treated my name like an ATM. Two-factor now lives on my phone. The accounts answer to me. By noon, they were on my porch with smiles, threats, and the word guardianship said like a favor. My door camera recorded every syllable. This isn't a story about cards declining. It's a story about a mother deciding, about a bank manager who shows you how to lock the doors, a lawyer who puts teeth on your boundary, and a doctor who puts the word competent in writing. You want to know how the check got paid? You want to know what it cost us to get here? Stay. I'll show you where the line finally held and what happened the moment I stopped being their emergency fund. The thing about decisions is that they don't always feel like thunder. Sometimes they feel like your hands finally stop shaking. Mine had been steady since 3:10 a.m., the moment I changed the passwords and removed authorized users, the moment I closed the transfers labeled rainy day that only ever rained on me. I froze what needed freezing. I turned on what needed two-factor. I took my name back from people who used it to print money that wasn't theirs. The night before, my kitchen was crowded with women in expensive boots who said words like cozy and authentic and meant good for content. Aubrey had hosted a planning night here because she liked how my tile looked on camera. The table was set with brie and figs. I warmed mulled cider and arranged crackers like I had all the time in the world. Her phone perched on a tripod, and she floated in its glow like it was her son. When the comments rolled in, she laughed and leaned an elbow toward her friend with the ring light. She said, "We're blessed. We have family who get it. Some people don't. Nora's basically our built-in sponsor." The word sponsor stuck to me, soft and poisonous. The room laughed, easy, a practiced chorus, and Caleb laughed too. He had the same grin he had when he was 8 and hid a broken window behind a curtain. "Kidding," he said. But he wasn't. I didn't say anything. I carried an empty tray to the sink and put it down without a sound. I learned long ago, in a trauma bay at St. Joseph's, how to move without noise when everything is already too loud. But there are some laughs that echo. They echo through 10 years of paying rent just until the freelance work picks up, through a new camera so Aubrey's content can monetize faster, through a weekend in Napa because we need a reset, through a down payment assist on a car that is better for the planet and worse for my balance. They echo through nights alone while my son and his wife post sunsets I paid for with savings that had my husband's name on them once. When the last guest hugged me with a perfume still new to the bottle and the front door closed on a gust of cold air, I washed the glasses and dried them with a towel until the thread pulled smooth. Then, I made a list I should have made years ago. Remove authorized users, close the emergency transfer, change every password, freeze the credit file, freeze the bank verification file, turn off family sharing, turn on two-factor to the number that lives in my pocket, not someone else's. I slept a little and woke at 3 with the kind of clarity people mistake for meanness. At 3:10, I opened my laptop, and its light made a white square on my face. My fingers were sure. There is a holy feeling to writing your own name and knowing you are keeping it. By 6, I had done everything I could do without stepping into a bank. I poured coffee and sat in the chair that still smelled like my husband's aftershave, though he's been gone long enough for the calendar to have their dates memorized. Dawn was a thin line along the Sound. At 7, I watched a gull pull something shiny from the water and lose it in a wave. At 9:15, I waited for the phone to ring. He called from the waterfront, and I let it ring twice. After I hung up, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the neighbor's maple trade its last red leaves to the street. The kettle clicked as it cooled. I pressed my palm to the counter. People talk about breaking points as if they come with warning labels. Mine came with paper, 10 years of statements, old receipts that bled ink when you touched them, a list scribbled at 2 in the morning when a joke told in my kitchen rewrote the last decade to say out loud what it had always implied. At 11, tires hissed on my driveway and doors slammed. I didn't flinch. The old oak door shuddered under my son's knuckles. It's a door my husband hung the summer Caleb graduated high school. The hinges still say his name when the weather swings. It's a good door. It held. "Mom?" Caleb called. "We need to talk. Talk on the porch. I don't open to shouting." "You can't do this," Aubrey said, and the words came out like a plan. "You embarrassed us. People filmed. Do you want that online?" You've wanted things online for a very long time. This is not one of them. There was a pause where I could hear them breathing and the small click of a tongue against the roof of a mouth. Then Priscilla again, using the polite voice you use when you tell a patient you have their test results and they aren't what you hoped. "Eleanor," she said, closer to the door now. "I'm sure you're overwhelmed. This is very abrupt. There are legal options if we see continued erratic management of funds. For your own protection, of course. Guardianship? The camera at my door records audio. If you're going to threaten a guardianship, you should say less, or say it to my lawyer." Across the hedges, I heard the soft buzz of clippers. Marta Ruiz, whose lawn edges are straighter than any sentence, leaned over the fence. "You good, Norma?" she asked.
"I am," I said. "Want me to call anyone?" "No," I said, "but thank you." Aubrey tried a different key, not just the one in her hand. "We love you," she said, sugar over vinegar. "We were just joking last night. You know how girls are when we're on live." "I know how people are when they show you who they are," I said. They stayed long enough to get cold and angry. They stayed through sweetness and through threats and through the moment when they realized none of it would work today. Then they left, the way winter leaves. Not all at once and not soon enough. The driveway was quiet by 12:17. I exhaled, for what felt like the first time all morning. In the bank, the manager's office smelled like lemons and something official. I spread my folder on her desk. Dates, amounts, recurring charges for services I didn't recognize because I had never watched them or worn them or gone there. "We see this more than you think," she said. Her nameplate read Reena Patel. Her earrings were small diamonds that caught the light when she turned her head. "Let's tether everything to your phone, not theirs. Alerts on every transaction. We'll add a verbal password that only you know. We'll remove every number that isn't yours. You're doing the right thing." "Doing the right thing," I said, and the words felt like a spoon of soup after a long shift. They felt like something I could keep down. The law office was dry air and diplomas. Harold Beaumont, Hal, had a tie that looked like it had been tied that way since 1982, and it suited him. He scanned the notes I brought and made a sound deep in his throat that translated roughly to, "The world is steady, even when it isn't." He said, "If they float incompetence, they'll need medical evidence. What you've done is deliberate. Not confused, not impulsive. Document everything. Save messages, keep a log. I'll draft a letter outlining your actions and your reasons, and you will keep it in your files. If they push, we push back with paperwork. He gave me a checklist: passwords, accounts, property, points where they had access and where they didn't. You're not alone in this, he said. You'd be surprised how many of my clients are mothers who wake up at 3 a.m. and discover a spine they've had the whole time. On my way home, I stopped at a diner I'd passed 100 times and never entered. I ordered the open-faced turkey with extra gravy and a slice of lemon pie, and I ate both without thinking about whether I needed to leave room for anyone else. I added $1 to the tip because the waitress called me hun and didn't make it sound like a favor. The window looked out toward the water, which slapped against riprap and sent a spray of light out to anyone looking. It was, for lack of a better word, mine. It was Marta who suggested the cruise. She caught me pulling into my driveway and waved me over, clippers dangling from her wrist. "Balcony cabin, 5 days, Wednesday," she said, as if she were offering a pie cooling on a sill. "Alaska. My sister can't go. You coming with me, or am I gonna sit on a balcony alone like some heiress of yard tools?"
I laughed, which felt like something I hadn't done with my throat in a while. "I'm coming," I said. "I'm coming." Before I packed, I did one more thing. I went to a psychologist's office with a wall the color of lavender and a shelf of ferns that didn't look plastic. Dr. Shelby Novak listened like listening was a sport she trained for. She gave me memory tests and asked me to draw a clock. She asked me to remember a list of words and count backward by 7s. And then she leaned forward. "I'm going to be very clear," she said. "Recognizing patterns of abuse, setting boundaries, securing your finances, those are signs of competence, not confusion. I'll write a letter stating that in language that a judge will recognize, without caffeine." She smiled. "You'd be surprised how many people need this letter to sleep, not because they're incompetent, but because someone else would like them to be." I left with her letter in my bag, a passport stamped, "You belong to yourself." In the parking lot, I sat in my car and held the paper and cried. Not because I doubted, because even a strong person can use a chorus. Caleb came by alone that night. He knocked lightly and waited for me to answer instead of the way he used to, which was turning the knob and walking in like a son who never had to ask. I opened the door and stepped aside. He looked younger and older at the same time, as if his bones were 16 and his eyes were 40. He sat at the table where he learned fractions with raisins. He took a notebook out of his backpack like it was a confession. He said, "I found a way to pay the insurance, and I made a budget." I nodded. He opened the notebook to a page filled with numbers, scratched out lines where his math tried and failed and tried again. He said, "Our rent is too high. Our subscriptions are stupid. DoorDash is an actual financial problem. We spend more on coffee than some people spend on gas." "Some people," I said, "spent decades on gas and coffee to get you where you are." He swallowed and kept going. "I didn't know how to make it balance," he said, finally, almost whispering. "Not really." "You make it balance by cutting until it does. It's not art, it's arithmetic, and it's adulthood's first language." He rubbed his eyes with the heels of his hands, those same hands that once held a frog you weren't supposed to bring into the house. His shoulders curled in, then squared. He looked at me for the first time that night without trying to make me forgive him with the muscle memory of his face. "I'm sorry. Not just for today, for years, I think. I thought you liked helping. I thought it made you feel useful, or..." He stopped. "I thought a lot of things that were useful to me. I liked being your mother, I still do, but I didn't like being your bank. Those are different jobs."
He nodded and pressed his fingers over the budget like he could keep the numbers from running off the page. He left with the notebook under his arm and a grocery list I wrote for him because he asked, and because I know the cheapest brand of rice and the difference between eggs that promise too much and eggs that do the job. After he left, I stood in the doorway and watched him walk to his car and thought about the way boys learn to be men and whether the bridge can be a conversation. Aubrey texted the next morning, "Coffee? No drama, just us." I chose a cafe with tables too small to stage a performance. She arrived without her usual armor of jewelry. She looked tired in a human way, not in a curated way, and it made her face look more like a face. "I'm here to apologize," she said, "not to perform one." "Okay," I said. "What I said in your kitchen was ugly, because it was the truth about how I thought, and because I thought it wouldn't matter." "It mattered," I said. She nodded and slid her phone across the table. A spreadsheet filled the screen, cells and columns and red numbers. "We spend almost double what we make," she said. "Not a little over. Double. We thought we were just almost making it. We weren't. We were surviving because someone else made up the difference, and it made us feel rich when we weren't." "That's a scary thing to look at," I said. "It is. It's also weirdly relieving. The numbers don't hate me. They just don't love me enough to lie. We made a list that was mine and then hers, moved to a cheaper apartment, one that makes more sense than a zip code that photographs well, cancel the boutique gym, keep one streaming service, meal plan, no content dinners unless they pay for themselves with a sponsor who signed a contract that uses the word deliverables the way a grown-up uses an oven mitt. Set an automatic transfer to savings, even if it's $25. Let interest be your friend. Let shame be bored with you. "Does this mean you'll help us again someday?" she asked carefully. "It means that when you don't need me anymore, I'll want to sometimes. That's what help is." On Wednesday, I stood on a balcony on a ship pulling out from Pier 66, the skyline behind us like a puzzle a kid solved correctly on the first try. Marta and I leaned our elbows on the rail and watched the water thin into a road. The air was cold enough to sting my teeth in a good way. "I didn't know I needed this," I said. "Everybody needs a balcony," she said, "and a neighbor who will share it." We ate too late and slept like people who chose it. In Ketchikan, we walked into a store with totems carved by hands older than any of our stories. A woman named Elaine told me how her 3 kids were grown and how she had paid for their flights to come home for Christmas for 10 years in a row, and how this year she told them she'd make clam chowder if they could get themselves to the door. She looked like a person who had found her key. On the deck one night, a woman named Isabel said she had learned to turn off the slot machines inside her own house, the ones that took her card in small pulls every month for things she couldn't see and never used. We all laughed, not because it was funny, but because laughing is sometimes the only way to say, "Me too," without crying. When we slept, I left the balcony door cracked to hear the water, which sounds like a million versions of yes, rolling over no, and smoothing it into something the shore can live with. Back home, my voicemail light was blinking, but it blinked politely. There was a message from Caleb. "We paid rent ourselves this month. It felt different. I hope you had a good trip." Aubrey left one that said, "I made a real budget video without an affiliate link, and 8,000 people sent me their own spreadsheets. I was surprised by how much I liked reading them. Who knew?"
I met with Hal again because sometimes hope needs guardrails. I told him I wanted to change my will. I don't want to punish him forever, I said. I also don't want to leave a trust that invites a relapse. He said, reward the behavior you want. Protect against the behavior you expect. He drafted a structure that felt like love, that doesn't enable. A base portion that he would receive regardless, not enough to float a life on, but enough to fix a roof or be safe from a bad year. Additional parts released after documented independence for 2 consecutive years. Budget balanced, consumer debt paid down, no new predatory loans, no recurring charges that are just shame spelled differently. Another part if they sustain that for 5 years. If he regresses, the trust reverts to the baseline and waits until the next good stretch. The terms were clean. The letter attached to the trust was cleaner. I wrote it in my voice so that someday he'd hear it in my voice, not Hal's. Dear Caleb, I wrote, this is not me holding a carrot. This is me telling you that you already have a spine. I'm not buying you one anymore. If you want to stand, stand. I will cheer. The money is not a gift. It's a measurement of time. It is years of your father working overtime and me skipping dessert, and both of us saying yes to one more shift. It is not edible. It is not a brand. You can wear it, but you can't see it. The way you honor it is by not needing it. If you show me you don't need it, the trust will show you it's there. If you refuse to learn, the trust will wait. Love, Mom. On a Sunday that looked like a photograph of an ordinary life, Caleb and Aubrey came over with groceries they had picked and a receipt they had paid for. Aubrey carried carrots and cumin like they were a spell she was learning to cast. Caleb washed my dishes and left my counters dry. He told me almost shyly that his card had run green at checkout, and they both smiled the way people smile when they show you a baby. We ate chicken I didn't buy and talked about nothing for 20 minutes in a row, which is its own kind of miracle. There are fewer grand declarations than I expected when life gets better. There are more quiet Tuesdays where no one calls to ask if you can cover a bill, because the answer is, we already did. There is a hummingbird at the feeder that doesn't care who paid for the sugar. There is a wind chime that moves when it wants to, and not when someone puts a hand on it. There is a neighbor crossing the lawn with a plate of cookies that taste like butter and cheerful resignation. A week later, Aubrey asked if she could bring me something to watch. It was a video she made that wasn't polished. She sat on a stool in a plain sweatshirt and talked about the way numbers lie when you blur your eyes and how sharp they get when you look straight at them. She admitted she had said things she shouldn't have said, things that might have gotten more likes than the truth, and she told the truth anyway. People sent her their budgets and their groceries and their wins. The comment section looked like a bulletin board at a church where the potluck is for anyone who needs to eat. I wrote one sentence to her in a text. You look like a person. She wrote back, thank you, I'm trying to be. I saw Priscilla at the grocery store and pretended not to see her until pretending was its own kind of cruelty. She cornered me by the yogurt aisle and tilted her head. No hard feelings, she said, with a smile too practiced to stay on her face in the freezer section. We all overreact sometimes. I'm glad you paid the bill that day. I always wondered if you would. She blinked, then smiled again, smaller. I suppose we all learned something. I smiled too, because I could be gracious without giving anything away. We did. We learned that skills we should have by 35 feel like miracles at 35 and 3 weeks. She laughed, and it sounded less like a card being swiped and more like a person. And then we both reached for the same brand of yogurt because we are, in the end, organisms who need breakfast. People like to talk about closure as if you get to close a door and never open it again. I think it's more like a door you finally latch at night and unlatch in the morning because you still live in a world where people knock. After the siege, my door sounded different when I closed it. It sounded like wood knowing what it's for. One afternoon, I took down the box with my husband's things, the watch that stopped at a time nobody wore, the old carpenter's ruler that folds like a fan. There was a letter inside I had forgotten, written in his jagged left-handed script, telling me to stop paying for other people's bad ideas. It was dated the year Caleb was in middle school, when we still believed time was a thing you could make peace with. I read it twice and put it back and felt him in the bones of the house. He would have liked this version of me. He would have told me I always had her. When the next unexpected expense hit, because life never grew polite just because I did, I paid it with my own card, for my own home, and texted no one about it. The roof leaked in one stubborn spot above the room we still call Caleb's. A man came with a ladder and a smile and replaced shingles that had given up. The check felt good. Money does that when it goes to a thing you can point to. Caleb and I started walking on Sundays after lunch. We didn't talk about money every time. We talked about a podcast he liked that wasn't about hustle or optimization, but about frogs in the Amazon that sing like flutes. We talked about how he tried to make a stew without calling me and burned the onions but ate it anyway, because something in him wanted to teach himself resilience with cumin and mistakes. We talked about jobs he might actually enjoy and jobs he could stop pretending to enjoy if he stopped posting about enjoying them and just quietly didn't. I met Aubrey once in a consignment store where she looked at a blazer and then at the price and said out loud, "No." She smiled at me, sheepish. "That felt like skipping class," she said. "The good kind." "You're teaching yourself a new class," I said. "Failure to buy, as a life skill." We laughed. She bought nothing. We celebrated with cheap cookies that tasted like relief. There was a moment when a brand offered her a lot of money to make a video pretending a product changed her life. And she sent me the email and said, "I could pay 3 months' rent with this, but I think I would feel like a thief." I wrote back, "If it makes you sleep like a thief, don't take it." She didn't. That night, with ramen on the stove and a basil plant wilting on the sill, she filmed a video about saying no to easy money and yes to the kind that feels like yours. It didn't get as many views as the old ones. It got better comments. The world is loud, but sometimes it whispers what you need. When people asked me what changed, I told the truth. Nothing changed for a long time. Then something small did. Then something else. Then the small things stood on each other's shoulders and made something large enough to see from the street. I said no one time and meant it, and the echo didn't come back to me empty. It came back with my own voice in it. It came back with names on paper and money staying in accounts with names that belonged to me. It came back with a cruise I didn't plan to need, and a neighbor who asked without prying, and a lawyer who wrote letters like fences, and a doctor who wrote letters like keys. On the cruise, under a sky that was so many shades of blue, it looked like an idea more than a color. Marta pointed toward a glacier and said, "Look how long it takes for a boundary to carve a valley. It feels slow until you realize the valley exists." At home, my backyard sounded like birds arguing about sunflower seeds. I watched a squirrel solve a problem it created by jumping. I let the phone ring once, twice, and then I answered it on purpose. It was Caleb, not because he needed anything, but because he had something to say. He said, "I fixed the toilet myself. It took 3 YouTube videos and a lot of swearing, but I did it." I said, "I'm proud of you." He said, "I'm proud of me too." It was all of it, a strange and steady miracle.
I didn't revise the past. It happened. The money is gone. And sometimes, late at night, I think about what my husband and I might have done with it in our 70s if we had made it that far together. Then I think about who my son might become in his 40s because I stopped trying to make 35 easier than it needed to be. I think about the people who watched Abadi's video and opened spreadsheets they had been afraid to open. I think about the way saying no can be a door that opens somewhere no one expects. I think about pie with lemon and a waitress who called me hun and meant it. One evening, I found the old carpenter's pencil in the back of the junk drawer. It still had the notch my husband had chewed into it. I took it to the patio table and wrote a word on an index card. Enough. It is a strange word. It means no more and this will do, and you are already whole at the same time. I propped the card against the little ceramic owl that guards the basil plant that refuses to die, and the wind lifted it and set it down twice. Then it stayed. The harbor looked like the harbor always looks when the day decides to be kind. I set down my coffee, listened for my wind chime to move on its own, and felt my house be mine. I had thought the sound I wanted to hear was the beep of a card running green. It turns out the sound I wanted to hear was nothing at all. When the phone rang again later, it was Aubrey. She said, "We found a cheaper apartment in a neighborhood that doesn't photograph as well, and we like it more." She said, "I applied for a part-time job to supplement brand work because predictability is starting to feel like peace." She said, "Do you have your lemon pie recipe?" I gave it to her, step by step, without measuring cups, the way my mother taught me. She wrote it down and promised to bring me a slice when she got it right. Sunday came again. They arrived with groceries and cooked in my kitchen without performing it. We ate on the deck because the cold was the kind of cold you show your breath to. Caleb said grace without using the word grace, which is to say, he told the truth about the food and the hands that brought it, and the money that paid for it, and the roof that held over it. He said thank you without saying thank you to me. He said it to the room. It was enough. Later, when the dishes were done and the wind moved the chime without help, Caleb stood by the door and hesitated. "Mom," he said, "if you hadn't picked up that morning, I would have figured it out, I think. But I'm glad you picked up. And I'm glad you said no. I don't know who I would be if you hadn't." "Me neither. I'm glad you asked me to be your mother again, not your bank."
He smiled and hugged me the way a grown man hugs his mother when he has learned how to do one thing at a time. Arms, squeeze, release. Aubrey waved from the car, and I waved back. The house closed around me when they left, not like a trap, like a coat. I sat in my chair and listened to the heater click and the fridge hum, small machines doing their jobs, not screaming to be noticed. Somewhere a gull decided a piling was worth its weight. Somewhere a waiter at a waterfront restaurant told a table that their card was good and the check was settled, and whether anyone was watching didn't change the taste of the food. In bed that night, I left the window an inch open and slept like a person who had said the right word at the right time and let it stand. In the morning, I got up and made coffee and opened the door to a day that would ask things of me I could give. I watched the neighbor's maple promise spring in branches that knew how to keep secrets. I reached for the index card and tucked it behind a book spine where I keep the things that matter but don't need to be seen. The word on it sang from the shelf. Enough. When people ask me now, when they hear the story and want a moral they can tape to the fridge, I tell them I don't have a moral. I have a practice. It is 3 sentences long. You are not other people's emergency plan. You are allowed to be kind without being used. You can love someone and still let their card decline. I say it to myself like a prayer when I pass the waterfront and watch tourists take pictures of water that will look like any water when it's inside a phone. I say it when I get a text from Aubrey showing me a pie that cracked in the oven and still tasted like lemon. I say it when I sign a paper at the bank with Rena watching to make sure I read every line, and when Hal emails me the trust document with the language we agreed on, and when Dr. Novak's letter sits in my file, a quiet guardian that doesn't need to shout to be strong. I didn't become someone new. I remembered how to be myself and decided to stay. There is a difference between those two things only if you haven't tried. The rest is numbers and recipes, and a neighbor with a balcony, and a son who learned to budget, and a woman who can apologize in a room without a camera. The rest is dinner that we eat because we can, not because anyone is watching. If you ask me now what the best part was, I will tell you it wasn't the moment the cards declined. Humiliation doesn't feed you, and revenge is a meal that never tastes like the picture. The best part was the morning I woke up and the house was quiet, and I realized I liked the quiet. The best part was the lemon pie. The best part was the word on the card that stayed put when the wind tried to take it. The best part was the knock on my door that came at a reasonable time from a person who had learned what a knock was for. The best part was the way the sound of the wind chime meant only the wind.